I'm live. Hello. Welcome to another exciting week of Who's Your Caddy. Uh, we have really been on fire the last month, and I will say last week it was kind of a mixed bag. Mr. Kind Eyes, Matt Kuchar, my favorite, and probably not yours, did not make the cut, and that royally threw everything off in half of my lineups. The other half fared well. The other half made money. So that's why I say mixed bag. And also, it's a good reminder that the information we give you is partial information. There is no possible way that you could take every name in a lineup and smush it all together. One reason for that is just the nature of salaries and how they work across profiles. But the point is that you can take this information and do what I do, plug some of it into one lineup, some of it into another lineup, and hopefully those mixes and matches make you some money. There's one thing I really do want to talk about, and that is my process. And I'm not going to dwell on it for a very long time, but I want to say that last year I had a very different process. It was very led by my gut, my intuition, along with some reading, along with some data. I still feel like at that point in my content creation that it was new. It was still new. It was just me having fun and giving the advice on what I would do, which is still the same thing I do today. But what I do today is very much more data driven in the sense that I read. That's how I start um, every week, every Monday, starting even Sunday night sometimes. But definitely most of my Monday is spent reading. I read all of the um, outlets like DraftKings, FanDuel. I'll read CBS Sports. I'll read Golf Digest. I read a lot. Out of that reading, certain names float to the top, certain stats float to the top, and I make note of them. Once I have those names, then I go to some of my tools. The first tool that's always readily available to me is a course fit tool, and I've been pretty secretive about what this tool is, but it's public knowledge, so anybody can use it. It's literally just called course fit tool. So if you want to go out there and utilize a course fit tool, you can. It will give you some insight on what skills are more important than others at every single PGA course for every single player in the field. And is it a Bible by any means? No. Even in their information, it states that we can look at it one way or we can look at it another way, and it's very subjective. But it is a tool that I like to take my initial picks and bounce it off against. So that's kind of step 2. Step 3, I will use a data tool like the one at Team Riser Fall, for instance, which is a paid membership tool. It's called the Study Hub, and it's usually finished around 1 p.m. Or so in Eastern Time. And you can go in there and you can see data based off the last 10 events, if I'm not mistaken. And that's kind of my next stop. I take my pool of picks, which, by the way, is much smaller than a lot of analyst pools. You may find analysts that have 30 or so plus picks in their pool. I'll start with 20. And by the time we do this show or I write my article, I'm down to probably 6 to 8 or so. And that's just how I like to play, because those are the ones that I feel the strongest about because of all of these stop gaps along the way. So after I look at the study hub, there's still another stop along the way, and that's a weighted model. And the term weighted model, or my personal weighted model, is not a term that anybody's coined. It is a literal phrase that is used to describe this model. So, analysts will go into these modeling tools and they will give a value to a skill set like approach or greens in regulation, or any of these data points that we talk about. So the way that I weight or give value to a model will be different than the way Adam, my co-host, will weight a model. We could come up with similar results, but I may weight something with a value of 25 and he only weights it with a value of 10. And that's going to adjust our rankings in our weighted model. So the point of all this is I really just want to be thoughtful and transparent in how I'm sharing my information with you and give you the confidence in the research that I put into this show every single week, and into my article every single week, and into my tweets every single week. I would never share something with you that I didn't personally research myself or believe in myself. So that's about it. 7 minutes. Pretty good. I am going to bring in, I got to put this up. Or I might pick Matt Kuchar because I have a crush on him. I mean, when he leaves his hat on, because you don't want to see like the tan line. It ruins like the whole image. But he has his hat on and he just has like these soft, brown, kind eyes. It's just like, kind of like when you look at a puppy. So I'm going to bring in Adam, who's not a puppy. He's looking at me like, oh boy.
I have zero puppy in me.
No puppy vibes?
No puppy vibes.
Dang it. Oh well. That's okay. I just really wanted to share that. I mean, is your process similar? Do you have your own kind of process? I'm sure you obviously have your own kind of process. Is it somewhat similar?
It's somewhat similar. I do a lot of reading on the course. And then I try to look at several kind of course fit tools and see how, where I should weight things. And then I do use the Rise or Fall study hub, and then kind of rank that model. And then I do some Excel stuff so I can import in my ranked model into the study hub main sheet so I can see where my model ranks versus the stats. So I can look at everything into a summary sheet. So yeah, it's somewhat similar though, because I still look at a course fit tool or a couple of them and use research I'm reading about, and then rank and weight certain stats on how the golfer is going to do.
Yeah. And we share a show sheet, and what I really enjoy about that is I'll put my picks in, or you'll put your picks in, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I wanted to talk about that guy so much. But I feel like if I talked about every single person, or if you talked about every single person, then we would never get through this show. But I do like it when I see when your picks kind of line up with something that I was on the same line with. It makes me feel even more confident in what I was looking at. So I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah, it's always good when you're on separate paths, but you end up at the same spot.
Right. Exactly. Well, this week we are talking about my home event, the Waste Management Phoenix Open. And I cannot think of a single year going back into my childhood that I've not attended the Phoenix Open. I am going to attempt to make an appearance on Thursday. It's going to be a tight squeeze for me because I'm also covering Super Bowl content because the Super Bowl happens to be in Phoenix this weekend as well. Little bittersweet, but this tournament is near and dear to my heart. It is unlike any tournament on tour, the greatest show on grass. Adam, what can we expect as the golfers tee off Thursday morning in Phoenix?
Well, there's a few things that you should know about this tournament. More people that were golfing last week's tournament were more excited about this week's tournament. And that's because it's a larger purse of about $20 million. And the winner gets about 3.6, I think, $4 million if you want to round up. So this tournament will obviously play a little bit faster because you're not playing with Aaron Rodgers as a pro-am. You're not waiting for people to go around the course. So let's play a little bit faster. It's your typical Friday sweat. So, cut day on Friday. It is, even though it's played in Phoenix, this event is one of the oldest events on the tour. It's been played continuously since 1944. It's par 71 course, measuring about 7,300 yards. So a little bit longer than the courses that we got to see last week. But the fairway's a little bit wider. And it's a little bit more of a links style type course. So if you think of St. Andrews, a little bit wider fairways, but if you get off the fairways, you're in trouble because there's just all types of different vegetation. And Tom Weiskopf, who designed it, did win the Open out there at St. Andrews. And so he brought a little bit of that flavor down to the Southwest. And so we'll see that a little bit here. There's a few funky things going on with this tournament that you'll want to take note. So the 11th hole, which kind of gets a lot of people, it's called a reverse camber hole, so which means it dog legs one way and then while sloping the other. So it's a little hard for those that are trying to shape your shot and try to get to roll, because the other thing is a lot of these fairways, because it is the Southwest, it is a desert, so the soil doesn't go all the way down and it is overgrown, and it is watered, but not watered to where it's like lush rainforest. So you're going to get a lot of roll out of those fairways. So getting something to really stick on a fairway, if you're trying to land it, shape a shot and try to get it to stick on a certain spot, it's not going to happen as much. And we're also about 1,500 feet above sea level. And what that means is you're probably going to get about 2.6% more yards off your drive. So if you're looking at about 7.5 yards per 300-yard drive. So if you hit 300 yards average, you're going to hit 307 to 308 typically on this course. And you're going to get a great roll off the fairway if you hit the fairway. So the average PGA drive is around 299 yards. At this particular event, we're looking at 314 yards. So this brings us up to our next key stats. Like, do we have to look at certain things more than less than others if you're getting 313 yards off your tee box? So.
I mean, I would think so. Obviously, every week we try and base our research off of some of these key stats. I will chime in based on some of my own native play. Depending on the weather, surprisingly, Phoenix can get cold. It will not be cold. However, this particular weekend, there's a little bit of a heat bump, which I don't know why, but it miraculously seems to happen every year for the Open. I can't remember the last cold Open. It's more like, oh my gosh, did I bring sunscreen weather? Because all of a sudden the sun is like burning your skin off. And when it is dry like that is when we see those extended drives. When it's cold, it's typically what people might call, oh, it's winter golf and that ball will feel heavier. That can happen in Phoenix too, but it will not happen this particular weekend. So we're still going to see those long drives. The vegetation's desert, lots of little shrubberies everywhere, really inconvenient, tiny little gravel everywhere. It's pretty ridiculous. And then the rough, they make it nice and hairy. If you do manage to stay somewhat straight, but go off to the right or to the left, that next cut is not forgiving. So it's definitely a fun course. The 16th hole is one that everybody knows. It's like an arena. It is loud. It is drunk. It is a spectacle like none we've ever seen, and I love it so much.
And they call it the cleanest tournament on tour because
Yes,
it's
it
sponsored
is.
by the Waste Management, except
Zero
when
carbon footprint, actually.
yeah, except when you throw beer bottles onto the 16th green.
Except for that brief moment before it gets cleaned up. Yes, it's wild. I have so many stories, but we'd be here all night. What I want to say is there are things we're looking at. I weighted most heavily approach and around the green and accuracy. If you were measuring, if you imagine kind of like half of a star, maybe like the bottom point to accuracy was like longer, and then I had little arms coming out from accuracy and around the green. And then I did think about distance, but I do have some picks where I'm not super worried about distance. What about you?
So I did have approach. Some of my stats were I did have approach. I did accuracy. I did add driving distance. And I'm going to say this is because driving distance typically here gives
Mm-hmm.
you a little advantage.
An
Um,
advantage for sure. It does not hurt to be able to drive it further.
right, and I'll say that you're not you're not going to be in a disadvantage if you don't hit those long drives because, like I said, you're going to have a little help from Mother Nature. So like Brendan Todd, who I typically love every tournament, and I could, if the sheet would let me add another pick, I would probably add him again. But he is the shortest, one of the shorter people off the tee box, and so I didn't pick him this week. But I also picked birdie or better percentage. I also picked proximity. So how good are they from 100, 150, 125 out? Because you're going to drive that distance. We also need to look at how close you're going to get to the cup. And then
Yeah,
also look at putting. Because a lot of these greens, if it's like St. Andrews, we're going to have a couple tiered greens. It's going to be a challenge to putt.
for sure. Well, here is something interesting. I ran into a couple anomalies as I was trying to build my picks for this week. Normally, when I go through that whole process that I shared at the beginning of this broadcast, I will naturally come across just a handful in the top tier, a handful in the middle tier, a couple in the lower tier, and that did not happen for me this week. So I really struggled. I came out with 5 or 6 personal favorites that I'm absolutely going to create builds around. I cannot imagine not building around these people, but they're pricey. So I don't want to sit here and give you all of the information on all of them. Just I will let you know these are the ones, the 5 or 6 that I just could not move away from. It was Tom Kim, Max Homa, Scotty Scheffler, Tony Finau, Cantlay, and I'm going to throw in Rom, who is like astronomically expensive this week. I believe like 11 and 12,000 respectively across both platforms. Cantlay, I believe, has won before or has been. Yeah, I believe he's won before. So he's definitely in there. He plays well there regardless of winning or not. So I think about that a lot. But I didn't, I couldn't just pick a couple and give you some stats. Just know that these guys are tops for a reason. And they don't go away no matter how I shake my model up. So, Adam, in this sea of luxury picks, I know that you have landed on a couple. I'm so indecisive.
Well, when you look at a tournament like this that has, you know, built for big bombers, right? So, um, hit it long, hit it far, and it's got a big purse. So you have to look at the expensive chalk. So
Mm-hmm.
like Scotty Scheffler, Rom, Tom Kim, and Max Homa are going to do well here. At least they should.
Right.
Um, some of my picks, we both matched up on Tom Kim. I think he'll do well at this course,
Yeah.
and the anomaly that of him just not doing, I would say less than average. Um, was it last week or the week before? I think he'll knock it out of the park here.
Yeah.
Another one that I think is going to do well, only because he's got that Patrick Reed chip on his shoulder, is Rory. I think he's going to do well. Again, he's one of the longest hitters on tour. He's got the accuracy, and if it's a links type style course, he's going to do well at, because that is typically what they find over there in Europe. So I think it's going to be kind of a home course for him.
Yeah. That's really logical. When I think of Rory, I definitely see him up there. When I worked him through my personal checks and balances, he started like sinking. And there are a few picks like that I just was like, they're great, but I don't know that I'm going to mention them. But I'm glad you mentioned him, because definitely that link style, like you mentioned, he's going to do well. And he's just a great player overall. When we talk about middle price tier, the struggle for me here is I really struggled to find anybody that I super loved that met my criteria. But I went ahead and I'm going to talk to you like I'm loving Cam Young. I decided that I love Tommy Fleetwood, maybe Shane Lowry. All three of them landed within the top 30 of my model. Cam Young, he happens to have the most substantial swing in salary between DraftKings and FanDuel. So, with rather him being like, it's like 8.9 on DraftKings, it's like close to 11. I can't remember the exact number on FanDuel. And that's quite a swing when we talk about this middle tier. Typically, we'll see around 1,500, maybe 2,000 difference, but this was substantially higher than a $2,000 difference in salary for Cam Young. So if you're going to play Cam Young, my tip there is to play him on DraftKings, where he has a lot more value for your dollar. Where are you landing in this middle tier?
Well, in this middle tier of budgetary restraints, I'm landing at Thigala, uh, Sahith Thigala. I think, despite him kind of melting out a little bit last year, this course kind of plays to him. And I'll say this, it plays to him because his accuracy off the tee is not there. And so that's the only thing I kind of worry about, is that
Yeah,
he'll lose strokes off the tee, but his approach and getting it to fairly close to the cup and being able to putt is where he's going to gain those strokes, or where he's going to make up ground at.
yeah.
Um, and so I think, again, this is one of those places where it's not really built for him specifically, but I think he'll do well here.
Yeah, when I shared with you my very first like pool, for lack of a better word, he was in it. And I love that pick. I think he's very strong in in this tier of players. But just like I mentioned about Rory, when things shook out, it was like, he's farther below than other players I want to mention. But again, I love that pick, the Gala. He's solid.
Solid pick. Next one, I'm going to have to pick only because he's trending in the right direction. And poor Mr. Ricky Fowler. He is the PGA lover boy, right? And so I think he might have a little resurgence here. It's again a little bit of a forgiving course if he can hit the fairway. He's averaging 300 plus off the tee box. Okay driving accuracy, and then when we're looking at greens and regulations, he's there and in proximity. And approach, he's not bad. The only thing where he doesn't shake out as well is if he's farther back and has to scramble a little bit and try to get to that green. That's probably where he's going to lose some strokes a bit. But overall, he's doing pretty good, especially in, birdie or better percentage. He's at 25%, and that's kind of up there when you look at, it shakes up there with Victor Hovland and a couple of the others. So he's not bad.
I am not giggling because I think it's a silly pick. I just keep looking at our notes, and when you type that, I immediately was typing in the shared doc. Gross, because I mean, confession time. He rose to the not in my first draft by any means. When I went to do my next round and my next round, and then I made like a quick change to my weighted model, I could not get rid of him. And I was like, ew, I'm just going to ignore it. And Adam typed in our notes, you can't ignore science and good fashion.
You can't ignore the math, and you can't ignore those the shiny little Pumas that he wears.
What sucks is that I actually love the way Puma women's clothes fit. So I have quite a few pieces, and every time I wear them, I'm like, I am not Ricky Fowler. He just, for some reason, like his stash, like his whole vibe just throws me off. But not a bad pick. It definitely kept arriving in my model, and I just chose to ignore it. That is not good analyst behavior, but I did. So there. So here we are in the end, the final tier. You have a little money left in your salary cap, and typically you would think we're scraping the bottom of the barrel, but this is where I felt the most confident. And I'm like, shoot, I'm going to play all these guys because it just looked so good when I kept matching up and matching up. So maybe the secret here is that I'm just supposed to play the most expensive guys and the least expensive guys. I'm going to see how that
The
works out.
studs and duds lineup.
But here we are at the 6,000 to 7,000 range. I'm very comfortable giving you these two very strong recommendations. I'll start with one because I'll be rambling, but Jason Day. He's actually on the cusp of being between a lower tier and a middle tier based on his salary at 7.9 on DraftKings, and then a pretty hefty 9.6 on FanDuel. He ranked out 4th in my model, and then I went and shifted just a couple things around. I mentioned distance, so I added like a tiny bit of distance just to see how things shook out. He ended up ranking 1st overall, and when I look across the field and how he ranks against the field, he is nowhere like even in the top 10 per individual strength. He's like in the 20s or 30s, but that kind of steady, solid, well-rounded play is something, worth looking at. So I really like Jason Day, especially at 7.9K, well-rounded, and he's just been playing really well overall. Where are you at in your first pick there?
Well, I have
You have a
Cage Lee.
few.
Yeah, I have a few because like you, I was like, kind of like everyone in this group. But starting off, I have Cage Lee. I think he kind of shakes out well again for this course, 300 plus yard driving, pretty good driving accuracy. And then he's got good greens in regulation. And then from a proximity standpoint on how he's going to, get that ball close to the pin, he does pretty well. He does okay, from 100, 150 yards out. He's going to do pretty well. He shakes out okay. At par threes and par fours, he does pretty good at. Par fives, he's not going to be that strong guy that's going to try to get that eagle. He's not a good scrambler. So, but all the other metrics that I talked about, weighting at the beginning of the segment, uh, I think he's going to have a pretty good shot, at least to get in the top 20. So
I really just found it super interesting to see how my top 20 landed and what those salaries were. Like I said, they were either very, very high or not very, very low, but lower than that middle tier. There was very little middle tier for me when I was looking. The second one that I picked up that I don't really play very often is Brian Harmon. He is actually a very balanced player, like Jason Day, very balanced across these pillars, for lack of a better word: accuracy, approach, strokes gained around the green, strokes gained putting. When you're looking at the data, he's actually stronger than average. So you know how I told you guys to imagine that half of a star? If we're talking about now we're talking about like a hexagon, he exceeds each of those little data points just a smidge, which means he's perfectly average, perfectly well-rounded, and then just a pinch better. And I liked that here on this course, especially since I was seeing similar data points with Jason Day. But here's where he's lacking distance. He is by far one of the shortest, if not the shortest, off of the tee out of my picks and probably the whole field. But he is worth that value at 7.4 on DraftKings, 9K on FanDuel. So heading into that middle tier, and he shakes out 10th in my weighted model. There are a bunch of honorable mentions that I'm not going to list them all out, but I want you to share your little list down there.
yeah, so I have where you threw out a whole bunch in the expensive Lexus range. I threw a whole bunch of picks out here in the dive bar category. So my next pick is Alex Noren. So if you're going to construct a studs and duds lineup, you're going to need somebody a little bit cheap, but he's going to make the cut. He's doing okay off the tee. He's okay on the approach, but for his last tournaments in the last 10 events, he's made the cut. I mean, there's been nothing spectacular except his last one. He came in the top 5. But if you look at his collective for the past year or so, or I would say month and a half, he's made the cut. So if you're going to construct and you're going to try to fit in a couple of those more expensive guys towards the top, Alex Noren's going to be that guy that's going to help you get that cut guy in there.
I like this one. Corey, I'm Canadian Connors. Corey Connors, I think he's kind of a staple of mine. At least he was last season. I like Corey Connors. I think that's a good pick.
I like Corey Connors too. Again, he's similar in nature to Alex Noren, but he has more history here. I think he'll do well. And for, again, his last few events, he's done a little bit better than just make the cut. I mean, he's made in the top 20 for a lot of his tournaments. And, if you're looking at off the tee and then approach, he's doing pretty well. And then you look at putting and stuff like that, around a green, he's not doing well. But if you're looking at putting and like the kind of the close game outside of the round of the green, he's doing pretty well. At 297, we'll call it 300. He's doing pretty well. And so he'll get a little bump off the thin air and then the rolling fairways. And in proximity, he shakes out better than a lot of those topper guys will do. So I think Corey Connors does pretty well here.
Your last pick in your little lineup here, Tom Hoge. actually ranks 5th. And I just went to take a peek because I remember seeing his name. Ranks, 6th in my weighted model, but in actual numbers, not weighted, he is ranking 1st in the field in approach. So approach is going to be very important here in this tournament. So I think that's a solid pick.
Yeah, he was a late ad too because I kept on looking. I was like, do I add him? Do I not add him? But I think he's going to do well. He has kind of an up and down history here at the Open, but I think the way that he's been playing has been somewhat consistent, and especially at this price range. His price range has been erratic, and
Yeah,
again, it depends on tournament.
yeah.
But at this price range, I think he's a pretty good value,
Mm-hmm.
especially for on approach.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like you said, he's up there and off the tee. Again, he's at 300 for driving. We'll call it, a little bit more than. But his accuracy for driving is off the charts. So I think
Yeah,
he'll check out pretty well here.
I love it. We have come to the point of our show where it's now become a regular segment, WTF Picks, as coined by Adam. My WTF pick is none other than, Wendy, brace yourself, Mr. Kind Eyes Matt Kuchar.
It's called
WTF, because
it's called a what
after
the fuck pick, not a dub pick.
what the fuck pick, what the fuck, Kuchar. Wendy, I will get to your question in 1 second because that is an excellent question. But I picked Matt Kuchar as my WTF, what the fuck pick because his performance last week was subpar. And the pricing this week reflects that. However, like I mentioned, when you look at the data, when you look at the models, knowing that he plays every year at this tournament, I know that he loves Phoenix. I could not resist putting him in. He comes in at number 20 in my model. My very broadest pool of picks, he comes in dead last, but that value I cannot stay away from. So Matty Kuchar is going to be my bottom of the barrel. What the fuck are you thinking, pick?
So my what the fuck pick is more of like what the heck, and I'd say that only because he's played so well here. I don't think there's a point in time where he hasn't been in the top 10, and he's slightly expensive. But Justin Thomas, um, I think it's going to be a good old boys reunion.
Wild.
I think it's going to be a good old boys reunion between him, Ricky Fowler, and Jordan Spieth, and they'll be just tossing back some of the Michelob Ultras behind the camera. No, I'm just kidding. I do think that it's going to be reminiscent of the good times when all three of them were the powerhouse kind of trio of the PGA Tour. I think he'll have a little bit of a boost from the Netflix documentary, kind of tallying him around. And he's not bad off the tee. The only thing that he needs to work on, and I think that he might struggle here, is those putting. I think his putting going to take him off a little bit of the radar. But outside of that, I think he'll keep himself in the game.
There you have it, friends. I took up a little more of our time because I wanted to share with you that research process. I've been working really hard on it. I debuted it when we debuted the show, Who's Your Caddy? So if you want to go back, gosh, I think it was into November, if not even September and October, where we did some European, we did some wraparound tours. But I wanted to be transparent with you and let you know that that you too can take the time to research and find out what your picks are and maybe match your picks up against what we find. Maybe that will help you in your process. Let me know if that's something that you do, or if you have any additional questions. Definitely feel free to reach out to me. Open book right here, nothing to hide. Wendy, your question is, last week I noticed several players withdrew. Why do they do that? They only did that because it was a qualifying week. Adam can probably explain this better for me, but there was no sense in them continuing to play that round because they were probably going to miss the cut, and or they knew they weren't going to finish well regardless. So it was more valuable for them to leave the tournament and prepare for the Phoenix Open, which is a qualifier. Is that correct, Adam?
Yeah, so the qualifier was like I think sometime Monday, and typically, you work everything out where you have the plane, to fly out Monday morning and stuff like that. But since the program took so long, and then everything got dark, and so they had to postpone everything. They had to play a couple of holes Monday, and a couple of the guys are like, "Screw this! I
Yeah.
just got to get going," because some guys were alternates, and they weren't going to be in it anyway, no matter if four people dropped out. But some people withdrew before because they were just not doing well. So I think there were three people that withdrew, I think, on Saturday. And then the bulk of them, you start to see a whole list of them start going like Sunday night, and then Monday morning, they're just like, I'm out of here.
Yeah. And that is not like a normal happening, Wendy. That's not something that necessarily happens every tournament. It just so happened that this particular time of year, I guess, for lack of a better word, really was came into play here. So that's why I don't normally see that happen.
It doesn't help that it was a program too. So
Yeah. That's true. And Wendy, what that means is when there are amateurs playing alongside of professional golfers. So if there is no question that we are not willing to answer, there are no dumb questions either. Feel free to ask. Reach out to me at Kelly in Phoenix or to Adam at Mr. Hallas on Twitter. And tune in next week. We'll be here. Thanks for watching, and gosh, let's go out and win something, right? All right, I'm going to press that awkward end of broadcast button.